Hello? What am I doing? I'm eating Cheerios. Yeah. What? What time is it? Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll be right there. All right. Okay, let's do this thing. Good morning. Welcome to Satellite 2020. I'm coming to you from my home here in San Francisco. I'm sure most of you are in your homes as well. So from my home to yours, welcome. I was just eating some Cheerios, but I'd rather be here talking to you about GitHub. So we have a lot of really great announcements to make today, but I thought it would be great to start off with just a recap of some of the stuff we've been doing at GitHub over the last few months. Last year, many of you know, we launched GitHub Actions. And the whole idea of GitHub Actions was to make it possible for you to automate any workflow on GitHub, including continuous integration and continuous deployment. And in November, we made it generally available to pretty much anyone who wants to use it. I'm really proud to say that now it's been less than 6 months since that event in November, and GitHub Actions is already the #1 CI service on GitHub. It's used by more repos than any other service, either private repos or public repos. It's a pretty big milestone. And because Actions makes it so easy for you to share the actions that you write with the whole world, there's now over 3,400 actions that have been shared in the GitHub Marketplace that you can use. So that's pretty cool. Now, in March, we launched native apps for iOS and Android. And if you haven't tried them yet, you should, because I think they're gorgeous. I mean, they're beautiful, they're buttery smooth. And one interesting fact about the apps is that the #1 action that people take with our mobile apps is actually to review and approve pull requests. Not exactly what I expected, but it kind of makes sense. I mean, if you're out and about, or maybe you're just like in your backyard or eating Cheerios, and one of your colleagues is trying to get something done and you're blocking them, you don't want to block them, you want to unblock them. So it's sort of an unblocking your colleagues app, it's turned out. Hundreds of thousands of people are using it. They really seem to like it. We hope you'll give it a try too. We also recently expanded GitHub sponsors to 32 countries. And now in less than 6 months, we've actually paid out millions of dollars to open source contributors and maintainers already. Our goal is to give every developer the option of actually making a living working on open source. It's an ambitious goal, and it's one we're excited about. In general, we think price shouldn't be a barrier to joining the communities that live on GitHub, whether their work is public or even private. And so last month in April, we actually made a huge pricing change. This is a major event where we made it possible for you to add unlimited collaborators to your private repos for free. And we've already seen teams around the world picking this up in pretty big numbers. So one example is India, where we've seen 2 times as many organizations choosing GitHub now than ever before. And then the day after we did that, actually, we completed the acquisition of NPM, which I'm standing here with this t-shirt. We were really excited. I was personally excited and honored, actually, to welcome NPM into the GitHub family. You all probably know NPM is the largest JavaScript registry in the world. There's over 1 million packages. And fun fact, last month in April, there were over 84 billion downloads from NPM. So it's basically used by nearly every JavaScript developer and probably nearly every company that writes software. We take the responsibility of running NPM seriously, and we're already working really hard to improve NPM, and we're excited to hear your ideas and your feedback. Okay, and then another big milestone was just last week, actually. The 50 millionth developer signed up for GitHub. This was on Sunday, April 26th at 4:06 p.m. local time. and this developer was from Great Britain. So welcome to GitHub, anonymous GitHub developer from Great Britain. We're glad you're here. Yeah, with all the things that are going on in the world right now, like lots of people have been asking me how behavior on GitHub has changed. With world events, are people spending more time on GitHub? Are they engaging less? Are they working less? What's happening exactly? And we've been looking over the data, and I wanted to just share a few of the things we found with you. So since January, we've actually seen a 25% increase in the number of issues created on GitHub. So people are basically collaborating more on issues and coordinating their work more. In open source projects in particular, we've seen pull requests take 4 hours less to get reviewed and merged on average, which is pretty interesting. And then on the whole, developers are spending about an hour more per day on GitHub. And that might be because maybe they don't have a commute anymore. And so that time that was spent commuting can now be spent working. Or it might be, hey, you're inside and you're not able to pursue some of your other hobbies, so you spend a little bit more time on the weekends or in the evening writing code and sharing it with the world. But basically, the trend is we see more collaboration than ever before, and that's kind of amazing to see. It's sort of in the age of social distancing, people are turning to social coding, and so we take that super seriously. All right, that's a recap of some of the stuff we did recently. And we have a lot of exciting new announcements today, too, in 4 areas: communities, code, enterprise, and security. And first up is communities. Now, communities are such an important topic to GitHub, but they're an especially important topic for all of us right now. The way we think about it is that an online community is the basic unit of 21st century society. And GitHub is a platform for communities. You can understand the history of GitHub as the history of us identifying what communities need to do and then giving them a platform to do that. So early on, we heard that developers needed a place to track their work and coordinate with each other. And so we built GitHub Issues. And then obviously we know that developers need a place to collaborate and review code. It's a great place to learn from each other, where you can share what you've learned in a code review and you learn from someone else. And so we built the pull request. Now, lately, we've heard that communities need a place to connect. This is a place where you could have open-ended conversations, ask a question and get an answer, or maybe brainstorm about a new idea that might turn out to be a brilliant idea, or just a place to get recognition for the work that you're already doing to help build a community or support the project, which may not be coding. Not all of the productive work that drives communities forward is actually writing code. There's lots of other important things that happen also. And also maybe just a place to say thanks. Now, some people might say, why not just have these conversations in GitHub Issues? But GitHub Issues is fundamentally a productivity tool. Imagine if thousands of people had write access to your personal to-do list, and they were using it to have open-ended conversations about all the things that they think that maybe you should do someday. Now, look, some of their ideas are probably great. So you want to encourage that conversation to happen. But in order to keep your to-do list kind of in order and not intermingle lots of other stuff, you might want to move those conversations to another place so that those discussions can have their own space to take place. So sort of in short, like every community needs a town square. And so today I'm happy to announce that we're building it. And it's called GitHub Discussions. So GitHub Discussions is all about building thriving communities and giving you a place to recognize whole new categories of contributions. It gives your community a home on the internet. So to tell you more about this, please welcome my colleague, Becca.
Thanks, Nat. GitHub Discussions is more than just a space for conversations on GitHub. It's a configurable home for your entire community. So let's take a quick look around Discussions because there are so many great features to unpack here. With Discussions, we've provided a home for your community right where they exist today in your repository. At the top of the page, you can see spotlights, where communities can configure discussions to look and feel just like your home. And it also makes sure that the most important discussions are super visible to the community members. But most important of all, we have a space dedicated to the links for your code of conduct and other critical resources that new folks should be aware of, so they know how to best participate in your community. Discussions is not just a place for questions, answers, and upvotes, though we do have all of those awesome features for you today. This is where folks come together, talk, give thanks, show off all the incredible work that they're doing, and even sharing ideas for brand new work. This is the home for your community. Next.js has been one of the early adopters of discussions, and we've been iterating on this feature thanks to all of their feedback. Next.js and others have been experimenting with just how they might use new types of conversations in their community that were previously not so easy to track or share publicly, but now can become community conversations. Take this discussion, for example. With over 100 participants, Tim was able to start a community thread where everyone wanted to publicly share the work that they've been building using Next.js. Another example of how other communities are using discussions right now is this RFC that Tim created for incremental static generation with Next.js. Community members have been upvoting this discussion as being a great idea that they value highly, and numerous people have been providing active feedback and thoughts on this request for a proposal to help Tim move towards a resolution. To bring fluidity of conversations on GitHub into your core workflows, we house discussions right where your community is, in your repository. Now, for questions, your community no longer has to sift through long issue threads to find an answer. We give authors and admins the ability to mark comments as an answer so you can find them super easily right at the top where the question is. Furthermore, with threaded replies, conversations can be even easier to follow without having to read through tons of comment references that were copied and pasted over and over again through an endless timeline. Now, I know this is already a lot of great features, but we have even more available, like issues converting into discussions, since we know that's where so many conversations are happening. And soon you'll have the ability to elevate really great ideas and conversations that are happening in discussion back into issues. And what more could you want than a centralized GitHub notification experience? With the notification experience that we have right now that's been generally made available to you, and the GitHub mobile apps on iOS and Android, we can provide you with the full experience to keep up to date with discussions in the space that best suits your needs. Last, but certainly not least, discussions is not just a space for your community to connect. This is a critical space for newcomers and others to receive recognition that goes beyond code. We know that projects don't exist without the help that you're getting from other community members to answer your questions, and all of that great work should be applauded and recognized publicly. So we're excited to be bringing discussions into the contribution graph to recognize all of the work that community members are doing outside of code. We've been iterating for the past few months in the open and getting feedback so we can make this space just for you. We have over 60 communities in the beta already and have been so grateful to be working hand in hand with hundreds of maintainers for this product. We know that it's crucial to get all of these dynamics right, which is why your feedback is so important to us. With all of that being said, I am so excited for discussions to be arriving to a repository near you this summer. In the meantime, come chat with us in the Satellite repository so you can use discussions right now to connect with us in the GitHub community. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Nat.
Thanks, Becca. Discussions is awesome. I'm really excited about that. And it kind of fits the theme of everything we work on at GitHub. I mean, everything we do at GitHub is really about making software development more collaborative and more approachable. And discussions is obviously a big piece of that for communities. But what about code? Now, over the years, a lot of people have asked me the question, hey, like I'm a developer, I want to become an open source contributor. How do I do that? How do I become an open source contributor? And my answer has always been just super simple and concrete. First, you have to find a project that you want to improve, and then you have to get it running on your local machine. Get it to build on your local machine, get a dev environment set up. And the reason is you can't make a change until you have the source code and you've gotten it to build and run. So that's always the first step. But way too often, that first step is actually a real barrier. In theory, you can just sort of read the README and run the magical script that sets everything up. But in practice, there's often prerequisites to install, and maybe those prerequisites actually conflict with some stuff that's already installed in your machine. Or like if you're like me, you've messed up your Python paths again, and so Python 2.7 is not playing nicely with Python 3. And so before you can even get started learning how the code is structured, you end up spending all this time and energy just getting things to build and run locally. But it doesn't actually have to be this hard. And today we're taking a new approach to lower the barrier to becoming a developer on any project by introducing CodeSpaces. CodeSpaces gives you a world-class editor running in the browser, backed by a containerized development environment that's hosted in the cloud. So instead of spending all your precious time setting up dev environments and trying to get them to work across all the projects you're working on, you can get started as a developer on a project with just one click. And so best of all, CodeSpaces is powered by VS Code and supports every VS Code extension out of the box. You've got to see this to understand how awesome it is. So to show you a demo, please welcome Allison.
Thanks, Nat. I'm really excited to show you more about CodeSpaces and how revolutionary I think it is. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of 2 young kids, which basically means I have no time. And in addition to being a mom, I'm an engineering director. I like to play around with new technologies, jump into side projects or open source, and make changes and commits on the go. CodeSpaces gives me the power and ability to tinker and add value to my team, no matter how much time I have. So here I have a super simple app to help me manage everything going on right now called Preschool Call Tracker. Now, if I wanted someone to contribute to this app, first they'd have to clone the repo, then they'd have to follow the README. Now, this one is pretty simple, but most of us have experience with really complex ones that have a ton of different instructions, steps, installations, and a high likelihood of me losing hours of time troubleshooting some obscure setup error. This was a problem that we wanted to fix. On our main repository page, you'll see a brand new code menu. Clicking on that menu includes some options you're already familiar with, like cloning a repo and opening in GitHub Desktop. We also have a new option to open with an editor, and in the future, you'll be able to open the repo using any code editor, so it will be compatible with your preferred desktop IDE. In addition to opening a repo with these options, I'm delighted to introduce you to a new, faster choice, a way to develop in the cloud. Let's open with CodeSpaces. So this takes a few seconds to spin up. I already have a CodeSpace ready to go. What you're looking at is VS Code, the editor itself, running in my browser in a VM with 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of RAM, completely set up with all of my dependencies running, automatically logged into my GitHub account with even my personal doc files installed. Everything works. Everything is ready to go. So wait, like the entire real editor? Yeah, the real editor. Let me show you real quick. I can open a file, type. I have VS IntelliSense and IntelliCode, which stars the most appropriate suggestions. I've got full colorization. I've got Minimap. Since any VS Code extension works, I have ESLint and can click on the bottom here to see any warnings or issues in my code. I can even put a breakpoint in here to debug. All I had to do to set up this dev environment was click one button, and it was completely tailored to this project. So how do we enable all of this? Well, by default, CodeSpaces builds a container using an out-of-the-box image that already has most of what you need. But I can also create additional specifications using a new standard, a dev container directory, that can define additional container requirements like extensions to install, since remember, you can run any extension, a port to forward to, and a variety of additional options that are specific to this project. And if I wanted or needed to further tailor my setup, I could create a Docker file in my repo that dictates a custom image that would be used to create this container that I'm developing in without having to go through all of those painful README steps. Let's start the server because there's more to explore there. We'll open up a terminal, which is something we can do because we're in a VM. And for those of you following closely, you'll see that my bash prompt looks custom. And that's because it is. Remember, in addition to all of your VS Code extensions coming with you and any additional configuration you've written into the dev container, your personal .files are also automatically available because they're being cloned from your personal .files repo. My .files repo contains all of my personal customizations for Bash, Git, Tmux, and more. If a .files repo exists in your GitHub account, CodeSpaces makes an immediate connection and copies them into your CodeSpace. This even includes shell aliases and any other customizations that make your developer flow yours, so it always feels like home. We started our server in the terminal, and you'll notice that I can hover over this link and click through to a new URL. But the link is to a local host, and we're not on my laptop. We're in the cloud. What's happening is that we've specified in the dev container that we want to run this app on port 3000 and forwarded that port on from your cloud-hosted machine securely to you so you can see your app running live just like you would locally. Let's make sure this thing is really working. So I have a meeting title in here right now, and I don't need the meeting title. I just need to know when it is, not what it is. We'll come back into the code and delete this meeting title. Now that it's deleted, we have this unused param being passed in here. And to see the full power of VS Code, we see that IntelliSense has dimmed the param, and hovering over it gives me the ability to click Quick Fix and clean up our code. We can go back to our app, refresh, and see that there's no more meeting title. Okay, so I really like this change. Let's commit and push from here. I'll use the Git extension. Right now we're on master, which you can see at the bottom, but you can also spin up a code space from a branch as well and push directly to that branch. So we'll create a new branch called meetings. Stage, we'll do a quick commit message and commit and push. Okay, so to recap, in just the last few minutes, we've cloned a repository, set up an entire cloud environment that functions exactly like our local one would, spun up a server, made a code change, committed, and pushed that change to a new branch. Now we can go back to our repo page and see that that branch and commit are showing up right here. CodeSpaces allows me to maximize the time I have available. I mean, if I can get all of this done within a couple of minutes, imagine what I could do during a kid's nap time, even if it was a short one. Whenever you want to get started and wherever you're starting from, now you can just click code. Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Nat.
Allison, that was awesome. Thank you so much. All right, there was a lot in that demo, so let's do a quick recap of what we just saw. CodeSpaces gives you all the full power of VS Code running in your browser with a containerized cloud-based development environment that's fully integrated with GitHub, all ready to go. You just click code. Now, we plan to offer CodeSpaces with really simple pay-as-you-go pricing that'll be built into GitHub, so you don't have to sign up for any other subscriptions. You can just use your GitHub account to get access to it. And it's going to come in several configurations. So if you need more CPUs, or you need more RAM, or maybe you need a GPU for what you're doing, you can choose the configuration that works for you and your project. And you can even have a different configuration for different projects. In addition to the container-backed CodeSpaces that Allison just demoed, we're also working on offering rich serverless editing too, so that you don't actually need to consume cloud resources if you're running in the browser. So that'll be coming at some point in the future. We're launching CodeSpaces in private beta today, and you can go to the CodeSpaces website to sign up to get early access and learn more about it. Okay, that was code. Let's move to chapter 3, enterprise. Now, we talk a lot about the communities on GitHub, and in truth, some of the most important communities are actually companies. We're proud that GitHub hosts more than 3 million organizations, including more than half of the Fortune 100 who actually rely on GitHub to power their internal software development at huge scale. Now, enterprises want the same thing all of us want: agility. They want agility and innovation. Just like the best software teams, they want to attract the best developers, and they want to create the conditions to make them really productive and happy. So the best person to tell you about the work we're doing in enterprise is Mario Rodriguez. Mario, are you here?
Yes, I am. Gracias, Nat.
Excellent.
Today, GitHub Enterprise comes in two topologies: server, which you can deploy on premises, and cloud, our SaaS offering. Quick aside on cloud, if you look at the engagement metrics, which as a product manager, I love to do, it easily outpaces the rest of GitHub.com. So there's pretty good demand there. As you can expect, we're constantly meeting with customers that want to migrate to the cloud. And in those casual conversations, you find there is a subset of them that face very strict regulations. This results in advanced security and compliance asked back to us. Now, today, there's not an offer in the entire market that would meet those requirements, which, in all honesty, made us reflect. So we decided to build it. And today, I'm happy to be announcing GitHub Private Instances. A good way to think about this is as the most compliant and secure way of working in the cloud, even for the most stringent of customers. As you would expect, it's a fully managed GitHub Enterprise, no surprises there, but it does differentiate in a couple of capabilities. For example, it has bring your own key encryption, it has private connections, and it also has the highest compliance standards. An example of that would be, we plan to certify for FedRAMP High to allow government use. We currently have a couple of pilot customers in flight, and we're looking forward to get it to market very, very soon. Now, last year was a busy year for us. We extended GitHub across the DevOps workflow. Users wanted an integrated offering from code to cloud, and we made that possible with the releases of both GitHub Packages and GitHub Actions. The reception of both products has been incredible, and in all the presentations I do, which is quite a lot, Action is by far the most requested agenda topic. This is why I'm thrilled to tell you that both Actions and Packages will be available in GitHub Enterprise Server later this year. So big shout out to the internal teams for this milestone. This gives you on-premise access to the same tools and workflows as on GitHub.com, and that is pretty cool. So we also know that you need more. Customers, you as a customer, you want to know, how are we doing? How do we measure progress? How do we understand what's functioning well? And where are the areas to improve? In software development, as you know, this is a very hard problem. We haven't figured this out entirely. And that is the reason why we're building GitHub Insights, to give you answers to these questions and a lot more. Let's play the GIF. I absolutely love this one. So out of the box, you see industry-proven metrics like code review turnaround time, pull request size, and more. I really like that you'll be able to easily set team goals and make it yours, customize it, and also add a little bit of fun to it. Further in the year, we're also going to be enabling our communities to create and share new metrics and reports based on GitHub and third-party data. And there you have it: Actions, Packages, and Insights. It is DevOps with built-in continuous improvements. So here's a link if you want to check out and learn a little bit more. And with that, over to you, Nat.
All right, thanks, Mario. Okay, finally, let's turn to security. Now, I think we all know, and it's increasingly obvious, the world runs on software, and it especially runs on open source software. So this is clearly true of every app or website that you might use, but it's also true of most of the physical devices that we're buying in one way or another, or the services that we depend on. If you buy a car from Ford today, the user manual actually includes open source license disclosures in it because the car contains open source software. So from a security perspective, what's happened is that this web of software dependencies that we've all collectively built has become a web of trust, and kind of everything depends on this. And so that's why it's so important that everything we do to make the software secure, we do. So we've been thinking about this a lot at GitHub with some of the acquisitions we've done recently, SEML and CodeQL, and certainly with NPM recently too. And we've been studying a lot of the open source code that's out there, and there's a trend that we've identified. what we've learned is that the number of vulnerabilities in your code base tends to rise linearly with the number of lines of code that you have in that code base. So more code, more vulnerabilities. As an industry, that means we need an approach that will actually scale. As we produce all of this code, we have to find a way to secure it at scale. And our current approach isn't scaling. So as we thought about this at GitHub, we've decided to take a new approach, and it has two parts. The first part is we want a community-powered solution. And our view is basically that the open source community built all the software and is building and maintaining all the software. And so only the community really has the expertise and the scale to actually make it secure. We can't fix this problem outside of the community. It has to be fixed in the community, in the way we work, in the work that we all do. This is what makes this an area where GitHub can help and can play a role in helping to improve security practices and the security of code overall. Second, the tools that we often use for code security these days, they frequently live outside of the developer workflow. And sometimes they're even a little bit at odds with how developers want to work. So I think what's clear is we want to make it natural for developers to do the right thing with security. We want to incorporate security processes just naturally into the developer workflow. Okay, so with all this in mind, we're excited today to announce GitHub Code Scanning. GitHub Code Scanning will proactively scan your code and identify vulnerabilities directly in your code review workflow. And it does this with the power of CodeQL, which is the world's most advanced semantic analysis engine, together with CodeQL queries that have been written and shared by the entire security researcher and open source community. So to show you this, please welcome Gray Baker. Gray?
Thanks, Nat. Code scanning is going to change the way you think about security and software development. What I'm about to show you isn't about sending more alerts. It's about preventing vulnerabilities from ever being introduced into your software and the software you depend on. So, every repo on GitHub has a security tab. And we've recently overhauled the experience here to contain two great new features, code scanning and secret scanning. I'm going to click through and show you just how easy it is to set up code scanning. Code scanning can work with any analysis engine. All the interfaces I'm about to show you would work just as well with one of the partners from our marketplace, like Shift Left or Rubocop, and we have more partners coming soon. However, I want to show you the power of CodeQL. It's a sophisticated program analysis engine with decades of research behind it. And as you'll see, it can find very nuanced vulnerability patterns. Let's click through. Code scanning and CodeQL run on actions, so I need to set up a workflow file. Everything's pre-populated for me, and as you can see, code scanning is going to run on every push and on a schedule, which is Saturdays at 2 a.m. I love that Actions has this mouse over. I always forget the cron tab syntax. Let's go ahead and commit that. I'm going to put it straight on master. It's a little bit naughty, but hey, this is just a demo. If you were counting, that was just 4 clicks to set up code scanning. It'll now run on every push to this repository. And if I click over to the Actions tab, I can see that the first analysis has already started. It's going to take about 3 minutes to finish, so here's one I made earlier. And as you can see, code scanning has already run on my master branch, and it's also run on a feature branch I've created to add some new functionality. Let's take a look at some results from code scanning in the pull request. I can click through and immediately see that code scanning has found a vulnerability in the code that I was planning to add. If I click across to the diff, I can see more details. Here, it looks like CodeQL thinks that I have a database query built from user-controlled sources. How did it know that? This bit is seriously cool. I can click in and see how the data flows through my application from the point where the user inputs it right the way through to where it's used in the database. And if you were paying attention, there was no sanitization along the way. This is a real vulnerability. If I need to know more about this vulnerability, I can click in and get more details. For every query that CodeQL uses, there are full details and recommendations on how to fix any result. In fact, the pull request that I just showed you was a recreation of a real commit on an open source project, the Flint CMS JavaScript project. It caused a real vulnerability. 3 months later, when this was discovered, the maintainer patched it and had a critical severity CVE issued. But that vulnerability could have been prevented entirely if code scanning had been available when that commit was made. And it's not just database vulnerabilities like this one that CodeQL can find. I'm going to show you a bunch of other CVEs that code scanning could have prevented. In each case, the maintainer has given us permission to show their repository. There are no 0 days being dropped here, but in each case, CodeQL could have prevented this from ever entering production. First up, let's take a look at this code injection vulnerability in Mongo Express. This was issued as CVE in 2019. It was critical severity, and the maintainer followed a totally best practice process. They had their CVE issued through GitHub. What happens here is that a user can input data that includes code, and then that data will flow through 14 steps across file and function boundaries to a point where it's used in a very unsafe way. This vulnerability could have been prevented by code scanning. Next up, let's take a look at a completely different kind of vulnerability, prototype pollution in JavaScript. Prototype pollution is an instance of modification of what should be immutable. In this case, the immutable object should be the object.prototype object in JavaScript. If an attacker can change that, because that gets inherited in so many places, they can normally escalate to remote code execution or cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. CodeQL found it in the same way. It traced through from where the user could input the data to the place where, way down the stack, that data is used to update the object. With code scanning, this vulnerability could have been prevented from ever having been introduced. And mixing deep is a dependency of 1.5 million projects. Here's a vulnerability in Go code. In this case, it's an open redirect vulnerability. Open redirects happen when an attacker can provide a redirect URL that takes you not to the site you think it's going, but to a second redirect beyond that. And they're particularly dangerous in OAuth applications, which is what OAuth 2 proxy is. They could have allowed an attacker to harvest the credentials of users who were clicking through on Google, GitHub, or any other OAuth provider. This vulnerability is CVE, but it could have been prevented entirely by code scanning. And in fact, the OAuth 2 proxy repo is now using the vulnerability that we found in GitHub code itself as we were alpha testing code scanning. This is in our Learning Lab application. And again, it's a completely different kind of vulnerability. In this case, CodeQL has identified that we had a route that didn't have any kind of rate limiting, but was performing file system access. Doing that could have opened GitHub up to a denial of service attack because file system access is a resource-intensive operation. This was caught in a pull request. It never made it onto master, so code scanning did prevent this vulnerability. Okay, one more example because you get the idea. In this case, we're looking at a Java vulnerability. It's in the Micronaut framework, which is a framework developed by the co-creator of Grails, somebody who knows exactly what they're doing on security. Everybody can make these mistakes. But in this case, I don't want to talk you through the result. I want to talk you through the query, because every default CodeQL query is open source. So I can click through and see details of that query. It's not a complicated query. It's just 40 lines in this file. And in this case, the query was contributed by a member of the Gradle security team, Jonathan Lightshoe. And in fact, Jonathan went further than just submitting this query and open sourcing it. He also opened 1,600 pull requests for instances of this vulnerability he found in open source projects. And this is a great example of the transformative approach of code scanning and CodeQL. It means everyone can benefit from the expertise of leading security researchers, and that those researchers can help prevent vulnerabilities. and start to eliminate entire bug classes forever. It makes security research scale. It makes security research collaborative. And it brings security review natively into the developer workflow. Code scanning is going to change the way you think about security and software development. Thanks, Nat. Back to you.
Thanks, Gray. As you can see, CodeQL is just incredibly powerful, and the power of combining that with all these community-created queries and being able to run those across all of open source is a huge deal. Now, everything you just saw is free for open source. In fact, it's expensive to run a lot of this stuff. As you saw from Gray's demo, we actually run all this CodeQL analysis on top of actions. And so if you want to integrate it into your project, all the functionality is free, and we will pay for the compute. It will cost GitHub millions of dollars to pay for the compute to run CodeQL analysis across all of open source, but we will gladly do it because it is the right thing to do. So just to quickly summarize some of what you just saw, you see code scanning is a capability that's natively integrated into GitHub workflows, and it makes it super easy to find these security issues and then fix them, and even to learn from the vulnerability information about these types of security patterns that you might want to avoid in the future. So it's educational also. It's powered by CodeQL, and we have over 1,700 community-submitted CodeQL queries that are available. And we've created the GitHub Security Lab as an organization that Nico Weisman leads at GitHub. That's a collaboration between GitHub employees and employees at lots of different tech companies who are basically all writing these CodeQL queries. Our goal is that for every CVE in open source that gets found that could be generalized, we create a CodeQL query that would cover that, so that instead of manually and sort of artisanally finding and fixing bugs one by one, we can eradicate whole categories of vulnerabilities across software. You should also know that code scanning supports a pluggable architecture. So if you want to use something other than CodeQL or use CodeQL and something else, you can plug in third-party static security tools, fuzzing tools, dynamic tools, whatever you want, and they can show up in the same user experience. You can also try code scanning for private repos as well, too. And we've just launched secret scanning for private repos as well. We've been doing secret scanning for a number of years in public repos, and we're now trying that out in private repos. So if you accidentally commit your cloud tokens or passwords to private repos, we can use the code scanning interface to help you find those as well. Okay, that's pretty much what we have for today. Let's recap what we announced. We announced a new place for communities to connect with each other with GitHub discussions. We're making contributing code to projects, open source projects, private projects in your company, totally frictionless with CodeSpaces, which gives you VS Code in the browser with just a click. We're bringing the best tools and workflows to enterprises with GitHub Actions and packages, and with our new GitHub Insights product. And we're making using GitHub in the cloud safe and compliant for highly regulated customers and industries with GitHub private instances. And then finally, with code scanning and CodeQL, we're enabling the developer community to make software secure. Now, I was asked, you should know that this stuff doesn't come easy. There are thousands of people at GitHub and in the VS Code team who've worked incredibly hard to make the last 35 minutes of stuff you saw possible. And so I have been asked to blow this ceremonial kazoo in their honor. So to all the Hubbers, to all the VS Code developers, to everyone who's made all this possible, I do this for you. And let's see if this works. I set that up myself, I just want to say. All right, so thank you to everyone for all the hard work that made all these announcements possible. We've got a really exciting day ahead at GitHub Satellite of hands-on demos. There's product deep dives. You can hear from some of the best GitHub users and customers in the world. How are they dealing with remote work right now? How are they implementing DevOps in their organization? All those things are available throughout the day. Or you could spend the day in our play track. So if you like the live coding and music that you heard earlier, we have a lot more of that. We have music. We have a lot of live coding. And we have an AI rap battle, which should be pretty interesting, and a whole lot more. So we really hope you enjoy the show. Please be safe and take care. Thanks.